There is only one inanimate world. Objects are things we impose onto the world for our own convenience. And the mistake I think a lot of people make is to think that the world has as its intrinsic ontic structure the structure of our language. That we have separate words for separate things doesn't mean that those things are separate. A concrete example is fist. We have a word for fist. Here's the fist. Where's the fist? The fist has disappeared. It just violated the law of conservation of energy. You see, this is the kind of mistake you make when you mistake the structure of language, the word fist, for the structure of the world. And I think that's the animist mistake. It's to think of everything we have a word for as a thing separate from other things, which has its own private point of view. That I think is flawed. I think the boundaries of different points of view follow the boundaries of biology.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree that that's how animist cultures that I visited, like, you know, the Kogi in Colombia or the Hopi necessarily understand the nature of reality. But what I wanted to kind of
I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. This may be our own Western misunderstanding of what animism is.
Exactly. But I wanted to delve in a little bit here, because this is something that's just been fascinating to me. I mean, and I know you've also discussed a little bit like the psychic and the paranormal, and how, so for instance, like the materialist reductive worldview, you know, which is still the governing structure in the mainstream academies, institutions, completely rejects, you know, psychic and paranormal phenomena for the most part. And we're having some people in this course who are, you know, like David Luke, who's a parapsychologist, Dean Radin, who studies psychic phenomena, Jeffrey Kripal, and so on, who are authors of The Impossible. And as I was exploring shamanism and psychedelics, I had many, many different psychic and paranormal experiences that I didn't actually believe in, you know, beforehand. And also when I visited different indigenous cultures, I discovered that they had kind of like a field of understanding in which different phenomena that were like impossible from our way of understanding the world would occur. So for instance, the Kogi, you know, would know things like, let's say you were in your room at night and a hummingbird, you know, came into your room with like a butterfly in its mouth. They would say, oh, like, that means your cousin, you know, has probably, you know, gotten ill in another city, and, you know, you should go visit them or something. And often you'd find out that whatever weird thing they had this idea about was true. So I guess what I began to think is that if there's this sort of underlying field of consciousness that's then kind of like sculpted and shaped by like human societies who maybe overdevelop over a long period of time, a kind of field of resonance with their local physical environment, and that also leads to them developing a certain like rhetorical system, mythological system, and they're actually able to kind of make different things happen, you know, that we would experience as impossible within that local container. And maybe the Rupert Sheldrake's ideas of like morphic resonance or morphogenetic fields is a way for us to begin to conceptualize this. And yeah, so I'm curious how that resonates with you and what you think, if that's clear.
Yeah, what you said is clear. I have never been particularly motivated by the paranormal, and not out of prejudice, for the following reason. I think the normal is incredibly mysterious, and I'm overwhelmed by the mystery of the normal every moment of the day. So there is very little psychic energy left in me to develop an interest for the paranormal. I'm already overwhelmed by the mystery of the normal. That said, there are two things at least that go under the label of paranormal that I think only surprising level of theoretical commitment prevents people from seeing and considering rather banal even. One of them is so-called synchronicities. They happen, all right? There are correspondences of meaning between our own inner experiential events and events in the world. And yes, some of these has to do with confirmation bias. We only see what's meaningful, we never see what's not meaningful. But even taking into account all that, sometimes the correspondences of meaning are so specific, so detailed, that you have to be very theoretically committed to something not to see it happen in front of you. I have had several experiences of synchronicity like this. The other thing I think happens is what can go under the label of telepathy. In other words, our private mental contents somehow leaking out into the world and being picked up by somebody else without the intermediation of language or the senses. These two things, I think, are empirically banal, but it's happening all the time. And how do I reconcile analytic idealism with them? Well, that's rather straightforward. Let's start with synchronicities. Under analytic idealism, our mind in here is the same mind as the mind out there. There is just a dissociative boundary in between. Therefore, the archetypes that govern the expression of my mind in here are the same archetypes that govern the behavior of the world out there. The templates of unfolding are the same. So it stands to reason that there will be correspondences between the two because the archetypal templates informing both are the same. They are part of the same mind, operating under the governance of the same templates of behavior, templates of mentation, the same archetypes. So synchronicities, trivial. There is nothing extraordinary about it. You may expect them to happen. Again, this is not giving license to the schizophrenic idea that everything is a synchronicity that has the meaning I project onto it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are synchronicities that have meaning, but not necessarily the schizophrenic meanings we compulsively may project onto them. The other thing, telepathy, um, under analytic idealism, it's all one mind. So how come I can't read your thoughts and you read mine? Well, it's because there are two dissociative boundaries between us. It's dissociation that ensures the, the private aspect of inner experience. So dissociation is a process in nature that sort of insulates different centers of experience. But no process in nature is perfect. When it stops raining, the ground doesn't dry immediately or completely. When something's burning, not everything that is combustible is actually burned. Combustion is not a perfect process. No process in nature is perfect. When it rains, it doesn't rain every water molecule that is up in the air. No process in nature is complete and perfect. Why would dissociation be? Dissociation has an obvious evolutionary advantage. You have to think of yourself as an agent separate from the environment. Otherwise, you're not going to ensure that you take the correct actions to survive. If you think you're the whole environment, you're not committed to your own survival. Why would you care? Oh, the body died. Oh, so what? So evolutionarily, there's a clear reason why we should be dissociated. Only dissociated processes would remain until now. Everything else would be extinct. But that dissociation will not be perfect. It's extraordinarily implausible that it would be perfect. Every now and then it will leak. Every now and then the dissociative boundary will be porous, that it will allow for some direct commerce of mental states that others can then pick up. So telepathy in that sense is also completely understandable under analytic idealism. And I would call both of these things, synchronicity and telepathy, not even as paranormal. Paranormal is a word that concedes too much to our current culture. It's just normal. It's natural.